Morning, everybody, and thanks very much to the university and Yvonne in particular for inviting us here today. We're going to talk a little bit about a comparative report that we've produced on some work we did a little while ago, the last 2 years, in fact, for the European Commission Joint Research Centre, and it's about climate change adaptation. And before we go any further, we want to be very sure that we know that everybody knows what we mean by climate change adaptation. Not to be confused with climate change mitigation. And I did notice Yvonne said mitigation before. Mitigation is about reducing CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, in order to reduce future climate change. Climate change adaptation, what we're talking about, is actually understanding and accepting that climate change is happening and that it's about taking measures to make sure that for the environment, for people, for businesses, that the effects of climate change the outcomes are as good as they possibly can. So it's about adapting to climate change that we know is going to happen.
So this is indeed work funded by the European Commission. Let me just...
First thing not working.
Is it working? We should want to move to the next slide.
So it's all right. Oh,
yeah.
Here we go.
Okay. So this is the report, but our starting points. Climate change is there. Climate change has impacts. The impacts are big. The magnitude of the impacts is really something unseen. They permeate all sectors of the society. They have profound impacts on people, infrastructure, sectors. They have also interrelated impacts, complex cascading impacts, which we don't really understand well. There are impacts on justice, just transition. Some people are more affected than others. And there is important also, there is a huge uncertainty. We know that the impacts are there, but there is uncertainty about everything, scale, magnitude, complexity, and so on. They are stretching far into the future. We are learning to use the system.
It's not really working here. Let's just get...
So, but because of this complexity, the solutions that have been implemented in the past to address flooding, fire, those impacts of climate change that are not new as such. There has been flooding, fire, glacier melting, or different phenomena. But those solutions are not going to work in the future. And certainly if we look at the far future. So we need something else. We need to invent other solutions. And climate change adaptation is not being implemented. So this process of creating resilient territories, cities, regions, countries, the efforts being done are not sufficient. They will not address the challenges that we are facing now and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So the speed is not sufficient, the scale is not sufficient. That's IPCC, so it's a scientific consensus around that. And relatedly, the policy field, so the strategy making, the implemented actions to address that are also almost not yet there, and certainly very insufficient so far.
And certainly compared to climate change mitigation, which is very well known, people do a lot about that. Climate change adaptation is a sort of poor cousin in the policy field. Just go back to the previous slides for a sec. In these slides, we're abbreviating it, okay, to CCA, just because it's a bit of a mouthful. And when we talk about it, we'll probably just call it adaptation. But you know that what we mean is climate change adaptation. So as Claire says, what's going on at the moment on it is not really enough. It's small scale incremental approaches to it. And that's not going to be enough to solve the scale of the interconnectedness of the problems that await us with climate change. So our thesis here for this work is that you really need a transformative type of strategy to address climate change. Even radical approaches are going to be needed here. And if you're going to take radical approaches to avoid much worse effects than we can possibly imagine, we need to harness as much as we can the power of research and innovation in climate change adaptation.
So in our work, we've been looking at this interaction. So in red, you have innovation, research and innovation, research, technology, development and innovation to be complete. This is an area, it's supported by policies who have been evolved towards current stage, which is called transformative innovation. So it's more than just R&D, it's more than just technology development, it's more than just innovation in the sense of new business activities, new product, innovative products or services. It's more than that. It's also societal innovation, transforming the whole world. And certainly in our developed country, this is what we need to compete and to survive. So that's the red arrow. The blue arrow is all what concerns climate research, climate mitigation, and now climate adaptation. Very recent concept, concern, and also policy area. Starting with just understanding what it is, piloting new things, and then upscaling towards something, then come to this sort of graal that we are seeking, transformative climate change adaptation strategies, which are at the scale and at the magnitude that we need, and at also the speed we need to address the challenges that we are facing.
So what we did was we mapped the key features of transformative innovation as we discovered them through the literature onto the main characteristics of climate change adaptation strategies. And we came up with a framework of conditions that any territory would need to advance towards this transformative adaptation approach. We started with 7 and we added one of them later. But they're about, as you see on the slide, awareness, strategic directionality, broader stakeholder involvement, cross-domain synergies, effective multi-level governance, financial and other instruments which act in synergy, experimentation, and good levels of policy intelligence and strategic capacity. These 8 features are what we're going to look at here today, and these are the 8 features that we believe any territory needs to go in the right direction. Oops. What we did was we used this framework that we developed on 5 case studies in different territories around Europe: Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur in the south of France, Gorenjska in the northwest of Sweden, Turku and southwest Finland, northern Netherlands, and of course Iceland. So we were also here doing work. This work was done for the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. The link on that slide there will actually take you to their repository where all of these works are, as well as our original analytical framework. What we're doing today is we're doing a comparison between all of these things that we studied, which is actually our own work, not necessarily funded by the Commission, but this is what we're going to present to you today. And just to make clear that what we're presenting is the situation in these different territories as it was in 2023.
And things are evolving quickly. So let's start with the first of those features. So the first is, we put it first, as Richard said, we didn't consider this point, achieving high level of awareness and understanding of climate change adaptation. We didn't consider it at the beginning because we thought, okay, everybody knows about it. It's about managing the unavoidable and not avoiding the unmanageable, which would be mitigation. But when we carried out the work, we discovered that this is not yet understood clearly, even at high level. We are not going to cite people here, but that this confusion with mitigation is there, is still 23, but was still prevalent. It's growing quickly, but still there is a need to clarify. There is a need to raise awareness about the fact that adaptation doesn't mean we don't care about mitigation at all. That doesn't mean that at all. Still need absolutely to mitigate, but the effects are there, they are long-lasting, so we need also to adapt in parallel. And this is time-consuming, this is costly, this is difficult. And if the understanding comes just from disaster-driven, you have a flood, you adapt to that flood and you do something about it. This is not climate change adaptation the way we mean it, not only us, IPCC, it's about changing society. So climate change adaptation is ongoing, efforts are there, but they are, as we said in the very beginning, minimal, not transformative enough, and often invisible. So there is a problem of invisibility of climate change adaptation and understanding.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think of this picture? So we present this picture because for us, this is a beautiful example of what we call maladaptation. Okay, so this is the south of France. This is Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region, and they are using artificial snow to keep their skiing going. And this is in an area which is suffering increasingly, because of climate change, increasingly acute water shortages for agriculture. Okay, and making that artificial snow takes an awful lot of water. So this for us is maladaptation. We saw this in that region. We also saw in the same region quite an evidence of denial of climate change. So we would see local elected mayors who are all powerful in the town or the municipality where they are, who refuse to acknowledge that their place is sinking into the sea. And they refuse to change the way that they are doing things or their whole approach. At the other end of this,
Oh, sorry.
I wish you hadn't touched that.
I was trying to hide this block, but
don't touch anything. Oh, right. So, right. Okay. At the other end of the scale of this, you have Northern Netherlands, and in fact, the Netherlands as a whole, which has a super high awareness of climate change and a super good understanding of adaptation and what it needs. And that's because of their history, okay? They fought and they actually carved and won their land out of the sea, and they've been struggling with the sea ever since. And the picture you got there, probably not very easy to see here, but it's a tool that they use for their climate adaptation strategy, and it's an interactive tool which looks at different climate change features or climate change effects, and it projects the impact that they have on different sectors and the knock-on impacts that there are on other sectors because there's an impact on what. It's rather clever the way it is. And if we get the chance later on, if we get the time, we could actually show you the thing on screen, how it works. But it's very impressive. On these slides, by the way, when we go through showing examples, that pinky color shows not very good or bad example, and the green color shows good ones. Okay. Some places have a more simple approach. This is the government website in Slovenia. It's just showing a quite stark picture of the Slovenian Alps as they are today and as they would be probably at the end of the century.
So keep on going. We have 8 features. The second one is about securing directionality, or so big works, leadership. Means there needs to be a vision about the territory, be it the local or big territory, how it should look like when it has become resilient. What is the trajectory to this? And there needs to be a champion for this, a figure. It may be one person or an organization, whatever, someone that personifies this vision and the direction needed in order to reach it. And it's plentiful of directions. But unfortunately, what we saw in the 5 cases that we studied, that there is not such a vision which is shared by the stakeholders, nor a clear leadership which is helping to galvanize energies towards this goal. Perhaps with the exception of the Dutch case, and you will hear us a lot about mentioning the Netherlands, because they are ahead. They still have a lot of work to do. In the climate change strategies, most of them, all of them are focused on mitigation. And when there is something about adaptation, it's often an ancillary of very hidden goal in those strategies.
One of the things that we were asked to do by the Commission was to see how far adaptation is guiding European-funded research and innovation strategies, and we found that everywhere that we saw, it's not. So it doesn't actually feature, or it maybe there's a bit of a horizontal, but it doesn't. It is not a guiding priority. So that's fairly clear. Iceland, although rather late to the game of adaptation strategy making, has done quite well so far, and has a national adaptation strategy and an advanced proposal for an adaptation plan, and has evolved a structure which assigns very clear responsibility to the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate and the Meteorological Office. That picture, we'll maybe look at that a bit later on in more detail, but quite a good example from Iceland. Netherlands again, though, I mean, really has a very strong approach. Netherlands has gone through a bit of a paradigm shift. So these days, it's not just about fighting against the sea and ejecting water that comes on, ejecting water out into the sea, because in fact they now have drought problems because of climate change in the Netherlands. They have to change a strategy about absorbing water, keeping the water on the land. So complete change there. They have what they call a Delta Commissioner. And this is, he or she, independent of any political party, but reports directly to Parliament and is a highly public figure. So a leading public figure there in the Netherlands driving this whole thing forward. If you're going to have impacts on society, you need to involve a lot of stakeholders, much more than the usual suspects. This picture again is Netherlands, and it's actually a group of farmers in an adaptation strategy exercise. Farmers, very, very difficult group in the Netherlands to address. They're normally skeptical of anything to do with green changes. So this is an illustration, but you need to involve a whole range of different bodies, the people affected by climate change, the people, businesses that might be able to develop good solutions. And what we find is that in the normally more northern European territories with the good participatory culture, that there are already good stakeholder co-creation mechanisms in place. And I would say that this is also the case in Iceland. We noticed it was very good here, that. Other territories south of Europe or east of Europe, not so advanced in that way. They are maybe just more depending on legal provisions, basic legal provisions on consultation. Everywhere, business involvement of business in this is difficult. It's not easy to convince businesses of the case for adaptation. So that's work to be done. And citizens also very difficult to involve everywhere.
So the point about businesses is important because, of course, climate change's impacts are mostly seen as negative. But if you are able to talk a positive story, this has a mobilizing power that the negative stories don't have. And so there is business to be done to develop and implement and sell new solutions. But we haven't been able to see much of that. And that, of course, is a barrier to mobilize businesses in particular. What they did in the French region of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur is to have their own little COP. So they mimic the global COP at their level, involving a wide range of stakeholders and wide ranges of consultation process and co-creation processes with their stakeholders. Just to go back on Iceland, and it was the same thing in the Netherlands. There are efforts to involve the young generation, a particular group in society, and to harness their creativity and their youth to co-create the vision, first of all, to mobilize, but also create a vision and imagine the new solutions through youth parliaments and so on. So those are interesting examples, including here in the Netherlands. So fourth feature, we said in the beginning that the impacts of climate change are pervasive. All sectors of society are involved. So strategies and actions should also consider this interaction between all those domains. But in practice, this doesn't work very well because agriculture is run by ministry or department of agriculture, land planning, those are other people and other stakeholders, social and healthcare, this is again other, but the impacts are crossing over those sectors. So in the reality, we see a big difficulty to implement action and to have vision and strategies that incorporate synergies and an understanding of the interactions between those domains. In particular, what we are focused on is the interaction between research efforts and climate change adaptation. There's still very much a lot to be done to create those synergies. And last point, very much linked to that, we are here at the university. Cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary research, or even interdisciplinary research is also needed. You need to have people studying natural phenomena, psychologists, anthropologists, sociologists, economists, bring the question of funding and value in this, working together. And you know how difficult it is to mobilize researchers to work really together from different disciplines. But that's also a challenge and something really needed.
For the examples, maybe just start with the last one on the screen there. So Turku, interesting example. They have substantially improved their water supply because it was rather vulnerable, and they now get water from something like 100 kilometers away, and it uses some very nice nature-based system. What's it called? Managed aquifer recharge system, if anybody knows about what that. Very, very good, and they have made a big investment in this, and they have secured their water supply. Great. But what they've done at the same time is, in fact, they have done a major climate change adaptation because they have secured that against all manner of changes that could occur in the future. But that wasn't the original aim of what they did. So that's a little bit something that we see. And Turku, they find it difficult to evolve beyond the water sector in adaptation. Provence-Alpes-Côte, they have been doing quite well also in water management, combating urban heat islands, but they're not really getting very far in some other sectors, important ones like agriculture, like healthcare and tourism, very important for the region. Let's move on. It's very important, the multi-level governance perspective here, because the effects of climate change are felt at the local level, and the solutions normally are to be found at local or regional level, yet the strategies and the legal frameworks are national. What we found is that, in fact, in most places, there's a pretty weak connection between the national strategic framework and what goes on at local level, often fragmented responsibilities at different level, across different levels as well. There are some examples of intermunicipal cooperation, and there's a good one in Iceland we'll talk about in a second for this, because obviously the effects of climate change go beyond the boundaries of each municipality. But here again, there's frustration because they don't really have the necessary budgets to tackle the problem.
And the story about Iceland, you can see it on the map that you from Iceland know. Municipalities are very numerous, very small not in territories, but in terms of number of people, inhabitants, and capacity. So in color, you see this voluntary intermunicipal cooperation. They are very weak in terms of they don't have budgets, they don't have powers. But we heard about interesting pilot project involving 5 municipalities, which is still going on, started 23 when we were here and still going on, where exercise is being done by the local people, but with the help of national authorities, meteorological office, regional development institutes, to help them understanding risks and vulnerabilities particular to their territories, and co-creating, imagining a future, a scenario for the future, and actions to be implemented. So they're still busy doing this and developing their own plan. I will speed up. We have other examples, but we need to reach.
Yeah, maybe this one, because we talk about Iceland. So
maybe just to show.
I think you need to be.
Yeah, there is the local authorities are in the implementation bubble in pink, and they are connected to the national planning, the national level planning, and the climate services by the Met Office. So this interaction is going on without, in this case, a role for regions.
Okay, so not only do you need the cross-domain synergies and the multi-level governance, you need the instruments, so the financing, and you need them to all of that to work together to make this whole thing actually work properly. What we find is that there are very few financing instruments in the different countries which are called climate change adaptation. The name doesn't really feature very much in instruments. It might be something else. It might be water management, or it might be something else, and it addresses adaptation, but it doesn't really have a name, except in the Netherlands. The Delta program is in fact an adaptation program. In the EU, European cohesion policy is a major source of funding for less developed regions. You don't get that here in Iceland, unfortunately, because you're not in the EU, but you will know, I think, things like the LIFE program and the Horizon program, which you're accessing, which have a accent towards adaptation. And there is a Horizon mission climate change adaptation you may have heard of, which Iceland is getting involved in. And that is beginning nicely to bridge the gap between research, innovation, and climate change adaptation. Non-financing domestic policy instruments are also important. Just a few examples. There's the Netherlands and its Delta program. No problem there. They don't even need European money. They don't even ask for it. They have a budget of 21 billion euro over the next 13 or so years. Annually, 1.5 billion they're spending on adaptation investments. Very effective agreements they have between national level and the lower levels. Let's just go directly to the last one in France. This is a nice one. So it's the law on zero net artificialization of land by 2050. So this is the idea here, is that for every square meter of land that you build on, or even that you put concrete on, there needs to be an equivalent area of land renaturalized in order to try and arrive at net zero. And this is a policy which is now highly visible and is highly, very much controlling all of the land use planning, spatial planning in France.
We're coming now here to the 7th feature, which is a very important one. We are talking about imagining a new future. So there is a need to experiment, to try new things, to fail also. That would be necessary if you try new things. So there is need to make room for this experimentation. And we found indeed in all our cases that there were a lot of experiments going on, often funded by LIFE or Horizon project, because, and especially Horizon is research, so you need to be innovative, otherwise you don't get the project. So there are many experiments, but they are often small. Often they are not very innovative, even if they are supposed to, and they are dispersed. And there is no real capitalization. So a project is being done, it's finished, and the next one continues, hopefully builds on the previous one, but the capitalization, the learning lessons from what has gone well, what hasn't, gone well, is not sufficient, certainly in face of the scales we are facing. So what could be done, but we haven't found this for adaptation, is something that is being done for mitigation. So it's creating regulatory sandboxes, so places or times where the rules do not apply, the normal rules do not apply anymore, and allow you to do things that are wild, that are not complying to the normal regulations. So that is an untapped opportunity. So the picture here is a double dike in the Netherlands. So another dike system, and you know, in Netherlands, if they don't have dike, they don't exist because the water flows. So they are experimenting with, I will not explain because it will be too long and very complex to understand, but double dikes which are nature-based rather than concrete-based, so many other benefits in terms of nature and biodiversity, even agriculture, in order to experiment new things.
So we have many places, and Turku is a good example of this. They can find money to do pilots and experiments, but they can't find the money to do the upscaling or the mainstreaming after that if the experiments are successful. And this is something we find right the way through. Also, of course, with the same thing, and you'll be familiar with this, when you get financed through projects, you get people to help you, and then when the project's finished, the people have gone as well. So it's a bit of a similar phenomenon. In the Netherlands, well, they've cracked it. I mean, they actually make experimentation compulsory in their programs, and they have pathways developed ready for the results of experiments to go into. So they're really way ahead.
And finally, we reach our 8th feature. Thank you for still being there, hopefully. Last but not least, it's about intelligence, data, evidence. We need this new evidence in order to understand risks and vulnerability. But we need this at the fine-grained detail of the local municipality, this river basin, and so on. And that is often missing. So, but the work is being done on that. What we also miss, and there we saw some examples in Turku about cost benefits, because we were number 6 was about the euros or the Icelandic krona that you need to invest. So if you have to convince people that it's worth investing money, then the question is what's the return for money? Very uncertain, very difficult to calculate, but we need to have the cost-benefit analysis of those investments and also the cost of non-actions. And that requires capacity, which is not yet there in terms of number of people dedicated to those topics and knowledgeable, capable to produce and or use this evidence.
And Iceland is a case in point there. Capacity is the big problem in Iceland in the public administration. You have a situation, one person doing the job that would normally have to be done by a team. So that's a big problem for Iceland, the capacity deficit. Some interesting use in Provence-Alpes-Côte of policy intelligence, looking at adaptation across the transportation system. The last one again in Netherlands, they really encourage people to think out of the box, and they have a comprehensive climate adaptation portal with a lot of tools there for use, but for public sector employees as well as NGOs and others. So a very supportive system, and there they are. So these are the Dutch climate adaptation worker network people, and in one of their meetings that they have on a regular basis.
And this is the final slide. It's a summary, because we realize that what we are talking about is quite complex, a lot of subject. But so those 8 features, let's recap. Awareness and understanding of what climate change adaptation is and means, and spreading this awareness. Number 2, directionality, vision, pathway towards the future, and champion figure, Delta Commissioner behind it.
broader involvement of stakeholders and more in-depth involvement, very good, strong cross-domain synergies.
Also cross-level synergies, vertical between local, regional, national authorities. The money to do it, dedicated funds or funds easily available to do that.
The ability to take risks and to experiment and to capitalize on good experiment results. And of course, underpinning it all, these high levels of policy intelligence and strategic capacity. We present them in this order, but honestly, they could go in any order. You can see that cross-domain synergies, that leads very nicely to a good use of instrumentation and funds, that directionality and leadership is needed for good stakeholder involvement and strategic capacity. And so, in fact, there are all of these are linked together with each other in many different ways. The point that we want to make or leave you with is that any territory needs all of these features working well to evolve towards what you might call transformative climate change adaptation.
And so if you are still willing to read more or come back to this, there are links to the report. I'm sure Yvonne will make the slides available. You can click on the link. There is a full report. There is a summary. The slides also will be there, and case studies, and there are other case studies also done by other people if you are interested. Thanks a lot. Yeah. I think we have taken 3 minutes more than the additional ones. Yeah. But thank you for your attention. We are, of course, very open to questions, comment, and further discussion with you.
Okay, thank you.